Tom, I wanted to thank you so much for being here today and doing this virtual webinar for us on the impacts of the coronavirus of the legal impacts that the coronavirus is having on our community. So a little housekeeping: if you're watching in Zoom, feel free to put any questions in the question or the chat box. And then if you're watching on Facebook, you can put information or question in the chat in the Facebook Live, and I will assist Tom with getting those questions answered. But Tom, thank you again for being here, and you have the floor.
Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Tom Winslow here with the Goldfinch Winslow Law Firm. It's asked to give you kind of a brief overall of how this virus, we'll just call it the virus, has impacted us in the legal community, and of course how that impacts you. You know, every time something happens in our world, there's always a virtual impact onto the legal scenario, no matter which one you might be in. It might be a landlord situation, obviously, which has impacted our business situation. I've been feeling a lot of questions on stuff such as family law matters. That would naturally be one of those things you would think about, but because all the time people have to spend together, they are having a lot of family law questions, I guess. So we'll get started. We'll kind of do a brief survey. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have either now, as was just stated, or later. And so the office I'm at is Goldfinch Winslow. Our phone number is 843-357-9301. Got my cell phone. If y'all wanted to text me a private question, I'll try to make it more general, and that way I can answer for everybody. But my cell phone number is 843-655-7333. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Let's get started. In regard to, there we go. All right. Legal considerations. So some of the big things that just in general we need to think about in regard to this virus and where we've been with it is just simply that courts have been closed for over a month, right? I mean, nothing is really going on. We're trying to pick up virtual court hearings in our local area, or in Georgetown counties. I'm trying to find a way around it. One of the good things, I guess, for all businesses, including court, is that this kind of forcing people to move into a virtual world. And so we have a scenario where people are getting involved and learning from a virtual perspective. And so pretty soon we're going to have a lot of hearings online, which is great. It will save actually clients money and time with their attorney who doesn't have to go to court and back from court. We'll be able to get a lot of things done more for clients themselves if they live in another state, potentially, than even being here. Primarily only emergency situations are currently being heard. And courts are starting to issue orders even without hearings, just off of written documentation. So it leads to the even more important gathering of evidence to support what you have to say, because your attorney can't put a flowery spin on it and not have the documentation to support it. So let's understand the impact on employees first. Obviously, employees are facing a huge situation. All this is probably stuff you've heard for the past month now, maybe 2 months in some restaurant industries. No matter the size, the employees are worried about their jobs. They're on furlough, maybe they're laid off. There's unemployment questions. There's questions the government's trying to address with the CARES Act and other situations and other bills. But the most important thing that we can do, as one as an employer myself, but also as an attorney, is just try to help them and educate them on what's going on, be transparent with them, and let them know that there are resources available for them, and do our best to protect them, to try to protect our businesses and ourselves also from a liability perspective, potentially. One of those bills that was passed that we all know about is one of the first bills that was passed about a month ago now, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. We've given previous presentations on this, so there's not as much depth in this slide, but if you need more information about this, please let me know. What it does basically is it tries to take care of a lot of those employees we're talking about in regard to emergency leave, leave to take care of their kids, leave to take care of loved ones that might be sick, and try to take care of them the best they can with giving them some additional unemployment. And the states pick that up as well. And so there is unemployment options. There's furlough options. Our governor in South Carolina has actually allowed for furloughed employees and independent contractors and business owners to collect on unemployment during this time period through executive order. So there are a lot of unique situations that don't generally happen. Generally, independent contractors can't get unemployment, but in this situation, it's been allowed. So that's something to be aware of. So there's questions on that. What I've been telling people, honestly, is apply. The worst that's going to happen is you get told no. but at this time, there's a lot of unique situations that are outside how law normally is. So a lot of what the CARES Act does is it kind of expands FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act, which generally takes care of companies, larger companies over 500, that applies to actually smaller companies around 50 employees and under. And it changes a lot of those eligibility requirements that we were just talking about. And that's actually effective all the way through the end of the year. And so if this back to work order comes in, just like we had a stay-at-home order, a back to work order comes in the next month, this act currently as it sits is still there through the end of the year. It doesn't just go away. So one of the big questions businesses have, here, let me drink some coffee. One of the big questions businesses have is what happens if one of my employees gets sick at my factory, gets sick at my office? What if a client gets sick or a customer gets sick? So let's look at that a little bit, as that is a question that's kind of come up. Number one, typically, again, workers' compensation probably would not be applied. Workers' compensation is designed to take away that liability aspect of a civil case, right? So in a normal case, in a lawsuit that we would have, we call those tort or civil cases that we've all heard of. You have to prove that there was a duty and someone breached that duty and it caused a damage. So in a workers' comp situation, all they have to really do is show they were working, and while they were working, they had a damage, right? So let's just go as simple as I'm an attorney, so I'm flipping through some papers and I get a paper cut. I'm working, I have a damage. No one's at fault. There's no liability associated with that. The paper wasn't made improperly. There's no product defect on the paper. That's just my finger getting cut, but it's still workers' comp. Now, I might not want to pursue it because it's not worth it, but that's an example of workers' comp. Can an employer be liable for workers' comp? The first question is going to have to be asked is, how do you prove the contraction of the virus was from working and not from going home and your daughter, son, husband had it, not from going to the store and getting it while you're out of the store? So is it possible that there could be workers' comp? Maybe. Let's just say maybe someone was exposed, like a doctor or a nurse or a EMS, police. But again, they're going to have to prove that it happened while they were working, and it doesn't show up immediately. There's a lag time, a week or 2 weeks, maybe even longer, where there's this lag time on whether or not you've had the virus. Honestly, it's an unknown determinant at this point. Can you have workers' comp? Potentially, if you can prove it. Maybe there can be some bills that come out that assist certain areas with that idea. On the other hand, it's going to be very hard to prove you were working when you contracted the virus. And so going along the same idea of employees, there's a lot of employment options or unemployment options available as well, as we talked about earlier. And so there's a lot of stuff the federal government has put out, a lot of stuff the state has put out that have expanded those unemployment options. I've heard a lot of times now that there's employees who are making more unemployment, especially because of the additional $600 a week than they were making actually at their job to begin with. So it's quite the unique unemployment situation. It's a lot like disability situations that we had prior to the pandemic, where people would only want to work a few weeks or work a few days because they would make more money by combining employment with disability than just having full-time employment. And so there's a balancing act that's occurring, and a lot of unemployed people, if they're eligible, are making, some of them are making more than they were while employed. And this is going to be in effect again. A lot of it's going through the end of the week, through the end of the year. So it's one of those things that will continue for an extended period of time, even if we do get back to work. So to see the impact on employees coming back to work if they're receiving this unemployment benefit versus leaving that and coming for a full-time job, if the bills aren't changed, that's going to be interesting to see. But we're not there yet. We'll see when we get back to work. Hopefully, every job's essential. Every business is essential. We all support each other. But hopefully, all businesses will be back. All essential businesses and unessential businesses will be back very soon. And we'll see how this impacts the law going forward. So talking about employers now, how does an employer avoid that liability, right? So if we talk about an employee getting the virus, what happens if, as an attorney, I'm at a law firm, I have clients still coming in to see us here. We're still fully operational. Our employees have been given the opportunity to work from home or come into the office should they wish to do so. But we're doing additional steps to try to prevent customers and clients, and also try to prevent our employees from becoming ill. And part of that is due to the avoiding liability. We don't want to overexpose ourselves to additional liability because we're not taking just cognizant, smart steps that kind of follow the guidelines that have been laid out by the government. So we're still having meetings. This is my conference room. We're still having meetings in here, but we're trying to sit social distancing apart from each other. A lot of handshaking has ended. People aren't even fist bumping or elbow bumping anymore. We're just saying hello and goodbye. Not a whole lot of hugs anymore. But other things we're doing is we're sanitizing the entire office every weekend. So every time our clean crew comes in, we ask them to not just clean, but sanitize everything. Get it all clean. Have it wiped down. Doorknobs and any space tables, any space chairs that might have been touched, sanitize it. If someone's showing a symptom, showing an issue, obviously we're kind to them, but we ask them to go ahead and go home and get better. They have sick time they can use, or they have additional protections they can use. Because that allows them the opportunity to recover and not contaminate or expose someone else to the situation. We're actually doing the same thing with customers. We've set up systems where we can do video conferences like this and or telephone conferences. So one of the biggest things to do, it's somewhat just common sense, is if someone seems to be having a problem, try to get them so they don't contaminate other folks. You're allowed to take temperatures of people. You're not allowed to discriminate people. So if you're going to take temperatures, you got to take temperatures of everybody. All the same rules will basically apply. Now you're just kind of ramping up that sanitation side of it. Instead of cleaning, you're sanitizing. Instead of having sick time, you're trying to make sure you catch them before they come in and they're sick. And so just follow the guidelines, try to keep your distancing and respect. And the employees will respect that. And of course, the customers will respect that too. No one wants to get ill, be sick. It's just one of those questions of how can we try to avoid it the best we can. And let's try to put that into place in our office. And I would tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to start thinking about doing that on a more permanent basis by updating your policies and procedures. Because one of the biggest things on the law is notice. Did you have notice there was a banana peel on the ground before someone slipped on it? Well, guess what? This virus is a banana peel. You've got notice now that these viruses can spread in a certain manner. You got notice now that these viruses, these diseases can have a big impact across the board on both employees and on customers. So you need to think about going forward. I'm not just talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about a year or 2 years from now. Is how are you going to take the lessons you've learned now and implement them into your policies and procedures going forward for your business to help protect your employees, your customers, yourself? How do you make people feel secure? And that should hopefully translate into almost a more content workforce that understands you're trying to protect them, but also customers and clients that understand that you're not trying to negligently yourself expose them and not taking their concerns into wishes. Customer service. Take care of those customers. If you don't, there have been a wide array of lawsuits, and there's more than this. This is what I could fit on a page. There's lawsuits over price gouging. We've all heard those. Some call it supply and demand. Some call it price gouging. But either way, there's lawsuits going on in regard to it. There's lawsuits regarding fake cures. Just saw an article about Jim Baker, who was facing bankruptcy and begging for money because he's facing lawsuits due to his coronavirus cure. I don't know why he would get more money based on his history, but he may. There's misadvertising. Target's being sued saying that they were selling a hand sanitizer that said it would kill COVID-19. It didn't. That's misbranding and false advertising. There's a lot of United Airlines flight cancellations are refusing to give back money, right? Breach of contract action, such as this Boston Sports Club. They're still charging members, even though the members can't go to the club. Down here you see this Trader Joe's lawsuit claims employee was fired for complaining. That's kind of a whistleblower action. Retaliation action, we can't have that. Walmart faces a lawsuit after employee dies that goes along that same concept. This is in Arizona. I don't know why this would be a lawsuit unless it's a workers' comp case that they're just simply calling a lawsuit, because again, it's an employee and an employer. Typically that's workman's comp. So that's a little interesting headline. But with that being said, they're out there. People are doing them. You know that already. Hazard pay, government workers file for hazard pay. Chicago nurse allegedly fired over a coronavirus email. Again, a whistleblower action. Let's see what else we got here. Bank of America loan practices, probably on the PPP. Costa Cruise Lines, responsible for the COVID-19 spread. They knew about it, didn't take any action on it. Then the coronavirus class action lawsuit alleges China hid the virus news, right? You've heard a lot about these lately with China and them being sued. One big thing on the lawsuit is the ability to collect on the lawsuit. I don't know about the ability to collect on a judgment if there should be one. But with that being said, again, it's going to be hard to prove. It's been in the news about this Wuhan lab, but how are you actually going to prove that the virus came from there? How are you going to prove that that's the same strand, that that's what caused the situation? A lot to be determined, ladies and gentlemen. First step is trying to get past the virus, and then we'll try to figure out how to respond to it on the backside of it. So, I guess specifically regarding China and the root causes of it. But for you to take away from this is be aware that even though people are fighting for their lives, they're also fighting in court and filing lawsuits in regard to this situation. So try to protect yourself the best you can. One of the things you saw there regarding a lot of those cases is that of breach of contract. We've had a lot of people call us here at the law firm, got a breach of contract because, let's just say you had a wedding scheduled at a venue. You can't go to that venue, or I had a cruise planned actually for, I think, this week in Italy and Spain. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let me go on it. Fortunately, I'm here with you, or maybe unfortunately for you, I'm here with you. But but a lot of people are facing situations on breach of contract, and so you need to understand that this is going to be an ongoing issue. And obviously, as we go on through this situation, those breach of contracts are going to keep occurring and keep occurring. They might reoccur because you might have had an ongoing contract that you violate every month for the next 2 or 3 months. This was happening a lot I have a guy that owns a lot of equipment for conventions, and he stores it at a facility in Las Vegas. He can't do his conventions. He's not making money. His equipment's just sitting in the storage, and he can't pay the storage, but he can't pay the storage guy. So the storage guy is wanting his rent. So our guy's pursuing his contracts. The storage landlord is pursuing our business for his contract. And so, one breach of contract sometimes leads into additional breaches of contract, just like we had with NCAA and March Madness. A lot of contracts were violated there. But is there an excuse, right? So what I always tell my clients, especially my business clients, is it's hard to avoid a lawsuit. How do I avoid a lawsuit? You can't avoid a lawsuit. I could sue you. If I knew your name, I don't even know your name, I can go online, I can look up your business, I could sue you for no reason. You never would have met me. What you can avoid is the liability behind the lawsuit. And that's what's so frustrating for people. We got a business right now that's being sued because they're one of 5 potential companies that sold a grill to a store. One of 5. They don't know who sold it, so they just sued all 5 of them, right? Our client, we don't believe, was the one that did it. We have no reason to be in the lawsuit, but we still are sued. We're just trying to avoid the liability behind that lawsuit. And so that's what you try to do in your contracts, is build in clauses that protect you in case there's an issue, such as this one. No one expected there to be a pandemic in 2020 until March, when it became a full-fledged shut everything down. And so you'll see in that second paragraph, there's 3 basic doctrines to look at within your contracts. This is also insurance contracts. Is there a frustration of purpose where you can't fulfill the obligation because there's a frustration of that purpose? Force majeure, which we'll get to in a second, just because people don't know exactly what that is, or impossibility or impracticality of doing the performance. Those are all just normal good old English language until we get to the legalese of force majeure, which basically just says in its kind of context itself for a contract that the reason that you couldn't do what you were doing was out of your control. You had no ability to handle this or to do this, and it's not your fault, right? So is this situation we're in a force majeure clause? Does it trigger that defense to breach of contract, right? You still got the breach of contract. You didn't fulfill your obligation, but now did you have an answer? Did you have an excuse for not fulfilling that obligation? And that's just simply because it was untenable to do it or it was impossible to do it. You know, is it untenable to, in let's say the convention situation, to set all your equipment up and move it down there? There's nobody there for the convention to occur. Is it untenable for you to be able to pay rent because they're still using the space and the landlord's still giving the space? Is that untenable? I would tell you right now, a lot of contracts, such as the canceling of a convention, that's one thing because that was kind of shut down. No gatherings more than 100 people, then it was 50 people, then it was 20 people, then it was 10. I think it's now like 3 people unless you're in the same family, basically. But I would say those are probably, a lot of those would maybe be considered force majeure. And it also leads to the next question of, is that an illegal taking by the government, right? Is that a taking without compensation? Because the government shut you down. So the government take your ability to do that, before they shut you down without pay? Is that an illegal taking? That needs to be explored. But in force majeure contract, maybe that's true. But with a landlord situation, you still occupy the space. You're still using it for your purpose. You still have a contract that says you're going to pay him or her the money associated with your using that space. And so you would still probably owe that money. The issue is that in South Carolina, at least in most states, have said that they're not going to enforce any evictions or foreclosures until May 1st. Now, with that being said, that might continue because we're about a week away from that point. It might be continued, but that's at this point, that's still where it stands. And so even though you're using that space and you can't pay it, the landlord can't do anything about it. Now, what we've been doing is going ahead giving you notice of the eviction, going ahead prepping up the documents, and come May 1st, we'll be ready to file for that eviction, that foreclosure, if need be. But you have a contract, and just because your contract's being violated doesn't mean you have the right to violate someone else's contract. So you still have to pay rent. You still have to comply with the terms of the contract. You still have to fulfill your obligations if you can. If you can't, because you have, and I'll go back, you have one of these reasons where it's untenable or impossible or it's impractical, right? If there's some legitimate defense to that, even though you've breached the contract, you have a rationale behind it that can be argued if necessary. And so this is still in effect in South Carolina, at least right now. But as you can tell, that date is quickly coming, as I believe today's the 24th. One of the big things, though, that's going to catch on that is that, and again, I'm going to go back, is that there's no evictions or foreclosures until May 1st, but there's no jury trials until further notice by the state Supreme Court. What does that mean? Well, in an eviction, almost any kind of case you can have, almost any kind of case you can have a jury trial. So even an eviction. So if someone goes there and files for an eviction or foreclosure, and they say, I want a jury trial, then that tenant has a right to a jury trial. Well, so although now that the Supreme Court has said you're allowed to come back on May 1st and ask for those evictions or foreclosures or whatever it might be, if you ask for a jury trial, who knows when you're actually going to be heard? Because as of right now, there are no jury trials. It's a constitutional right to be allowed to have a jury. So they're going to have to find a workaround for this situation. How are you going to find a workaround when you have to do social distancing of 6 feet for 12 jurors? You know, to do it, there's just not enough room in a jury box or even a courtroom a lot of times to do 6 feet between all 12 jurors and the rest of the people there. So how are you going to do a jury trial with the current standards we have in place? Who knows? So that's going to put a standstill. It's going to cause an issue even when you can come back and resume normal activity, because we have that constitutional right to a jury, and that includes evictions. Recently, the governor just put out an order a couple days ago that allowed certain businesses to come back into play. And that was retail stores, as you can see here, could open up this past Monday and get back to work. And this is going to probably continue and continue on. Obviously, the hard part for a lot of restaurants and whatnot is, first ones to be closed are probably going to be the last ones to be reopened. But what this shows is that non-essential, which again, if you walked outside without clothes and shoes, I'm pretty sure you get arrested. So you could call that essential. But hey, with that being said, you're allowed to be back at work now as long as you follow the rules. But what are the rules? These are the primary rules that you have to maintain the maximum emergency occupancy rate. Okay, and that is basically 5 customers per 1,000 square feet of rental space. So you can't have more than basically 20% of what is allowed. So if your space was allowed to have 100 people in it by the fire marshal, you can now only have 20 people in it. Okay, so if you see those signs on the walls in a lot of places and it says, again, 300 people can occupy this space, what this means is you can only have 60 people occupying that space. And then on top of that, they want you to try to make sure everybody's staying 6 feet away from each other. They want you to make sure that not only do you have a minimum or maybe a maximum of 20% of people in there, but they also stay 6 feet away from each other. When you go to Costco, you'll see a line outside the store where they're doing stuff like that. Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart. And so they're really trying to enforce this pretty strongly. And if you read the paper that just came out, I believe yesterday maybe, 10 people received tickets at a place called Uncle Tito's down the Marsh Walk for failing to abide by these rules. And so they are enforcing it, and they are giving out tickets. So just be aware. And so if you have a store that is open, even though, and again, I'll go back, even though you're not one of these retail stores, you're a law firm such as we are, I would recommend to you that you follow this. You follow this emergency maximum occupancy rating in regard to your customers, and you try to keep them 6 feet away from each other. Again, it's kind of a guideline, right? So you don't want, it helps you with the liability side of situations. It also would help you with hopefully maybe your customer and your customer service and customer support. But keep this in mind. This is the last executive order that's been put out. That came out a couple of days ago. But there will be more to come, and this is good news as it shows that they're starting to open what certain people deem to be unessential businesses. To us, every business is essential. We all feed off each other and support each other. And they want you to be around if people don't want your services, which makes you essential. Impact on criminal law. So we've talked a lot about employees, employers, civil court, landlords, unemployment. But the biggest impact, or one of the biggest impacts being felt, is criminal law. They've done away with preliminary hearings. A preliminary hearing is where a judge hears you in your case pretty much immediately on whether or not there's even enough evidence for you to have a case in court. They've done away with those preliminary hearings. There's no jury trials, again, in criminal court, but you have a constitutional right to a speedy trial. So there's no jury trial, and you want a jury, and normally you want a jury in criminal court unless you're going to plead guilty or try to get some reduced plea deal. Then how are you getting a speedy trial if you can't even have a trial to begin with? And so that's going to be a question that's going to be faced. And I actually haven't heard a whole lot about it, other than the fact that there's a lot of inmates actually being released out of fear of contracting the coronavirus, which is ironic considering you can get arrested and be put in jail for violating these guidelines and these rules, but you can be released from jail on a more legitimate circumstance where you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers, which again, jury of your peers, that's a constitutional right. Keep in mind, like I was saying, police departments a lot of times are scaling back on these arrests. There's been a lot less criminal arrests and prosecutions on low-level situations such as speeding or maybe a seatbelt violation. Nothing, if it's violent, if there's some kind of burglary or rape or some of that nature, they're going to enforce that. But they're pulling back and the resources are more limited, right? One out of 5 officers, I think, in New York City is at one point declared to be ill. And so there's a lot less resources available, both from they're being put in different locations, such as they're being put at hospitals, being put at food banks and stuff like that to protect that area. But there are also less of them because they're sick and they're not available. And so what that means to you as an individual at your home or you as a business is that unless you have a serious situation, there's a chance the police will not be able to respond to you very promptly at all, or potentially they won't respond at all, and they'll just take down some information. And so there was a case I heard yesterday where someone had an individual who didn't have a home broke into a restaurant, was sleeping in the restaurant for 4 days, selling the supplies of the restaurant out the back door, and they didn't know about it because no one had driven by the area for 4 days. That's not going to happen on a normal routine with police. They're going to drive by the area at least once a day. So it's just one of those things that you always have to be a little bit more vigilant on your own for your protection, your business's protection. But you can't obviously go to the level of taking your own action and exposing yourself to your own potential criminal charges. So just be aware, be more vigilant in your protection, and be aware of what's going on, as the police may not be able to respond because of their limited resources. Another area beyond criminal court that's really been impacted is family court. It's kind of crazy, or it just completely makes sense that the more time people spend together, the less they like each other, or the more they like each other. So we're getting a lot of responses right now from a family law situation. I think we had 5 family law cases come in yesterday or the day before yesterday. And it's just one of those things where it's amazing what you don't think about, right? Who would have thought in March we would have been under a lockdown and there would have been this pandemic where things would have completely changed. And then who would have thought, oh, family law is going to be one of the major things that gets impacted. But it is. And so what I've done here is just list out some of the major questions that have been put down. One of the big questions was that if you have an order, right, so in family law, it mostly affects spouses, husband and wife, and or their children. That's kind of the primary gist of it. There's some other things that go along with it. But mostly family is spouse and children in some fashion or another. And so if there's an order in place for you to share custody and or visitation, you still have to follow the order. It's still an order by the court. And if you look at a lot of the executive orders out there by governors, they're saying explicitly you still have to follow court orders. And so with that being said, you still have to follow that order. Now, with that being said, if your husband or the father of your children has the coronavirus and he's sick in the hospital, do you have to take your child to him for his visitation weekend? I mean, right? I mean, the order says you have to. In that situation, it's a Solomon's baby situation, right? King Solomon said, okay, well, let's cut the baby in half, and we'll give each mother half the child. The real mother stood up and said, look, let's do what's best for the child. And that's how King Solomon knew whose baby the baby truly was. Same situation applies here. The thing with children in family court is what's best for that child, right? What's in the best interest of that child? Is it in the best interest of that child to go and be exposed unnecessarily to a virus or to a bad situation? No, it's not. But it's unilaterally not your choice to make either as a wife or a husband. You can't unilaterally make that choice. And if you do, you can be faced with motions such as a rule to show cause or other kind of contempt motions, stuff of that nature. There is no right answer. There's just not a right answer. You have to follow the order, but at the same time, it's your job to do what's best for the child. So if you decide, hey, I'm not going to let my child go because I'm concerned about the situation there, try to work out maybe a different thing. If there's an area of town, right? Dad lives in New York City. Instead of going to New York City for the child, maybe you can meet somewhere in the country of North Carolina. I don't know, but try to find a workaround that will keep you out of court. But if you feel as if it's in the best interest of that child, you can explain that with evidence and fairly to a court, then you can take that risk, and the court might be willing to understand that situation because they care more about that child than they do about you. But there is a court order, and the correct legal answer is you need to follow that court order. Again, whether the other parent's in another state, same concept applies. Can I file for divorce right now? The answer is yes. Actually, somewhat easier to file for divorce now. They're doing a lot of stuff online. And again, in South Carolina, to do a divorce, you actually are supposed to go to court after you got to go through your proving of everything and get through it, and actually get the court to approve it. They're relatively silly. I mean, you go and you just have to say, I want a divorce, and you're not going to get back together and prove that you're separated for a certain period of time, the court is actually allowing you just to do affidavits and submit, and the judge will sign off on it without you ever having to go to court. A lot of states do it that way. South Carolina doesn't. A lot of states do it that way, and it makes sense, and it's easy. It saves time and money. It saves the court probably tons of time and money. I remember going up there, and you would spend half a day or a whole day, and the judge would take 10 minutes of hearing and just crank through divorces. 10 minutes of hearing, it would be an entire day. Now I'm sure that judge can flip through, see exactly what they need, and sign off. These judges they know what they're doing. They can sign off and say, all right, we're good to go, and be probably done in an hour instead of spending an entire day on it. And so hopefully that's something that actually will change going into the future. But yes, you can get a divorce. You can file for divorce, and you can still get emergency hearings. We have an unfortunate situation where a young lady was being abused. And so we filed for an emergency hearing, and we have an emergency hearing coming up that was scheduled basically within a week of asking for it. So they're still open for emergency hearings, but not for stuff that is not an emergency, right? And you can see that there under number 5. Things related to children and their protection, or spouses and their protection, they need to be heard. But unfortunately, you can still stay married even if you don't want to for right now. Number 6, I guess, would be a very important one to point out. If you're paying child support and you don't have a job, right? I'm not making any money now. You still have to pay. You're still under a court order to pay your child support. Now, the interesting thing is you can file a motion to show that things have been changed, right? Modification, you're modifying your child support obligations. You can file a motion to get it modified, but who's going to hear it right now? Probably not anyone. That's not an emergency. Probably not anyone right now. So you can file the motion for the court to hear it when they have the time to hear it. But as of right now, you're still under that order. And the one I never thought about until it was presented to me was where some people are getting these checks, whether you want to call them support checks or stimulus checks, or making more money on unemployment than were while being employed. When you're divorcing, you take an accounting of the assets and inventory that the spouses have, and is that money coming in, that $1,200 and or the additional unemployment, is that going to be counted towards your income levels and the money and assets you have? It's interesting. I mean, it hasn't really been decided yet because no court has ruled on it. But it is money coming into your pocket, just like if you're paid to mow the yard next door, and it does belong to the relationship, most likely. Moving into another field of law, real estate. Real estate's still going. People are still building. They're still buying. They're still selling. Obviously, this hasn't been going on for a prolonged period of time, again, a month and a half. So a lot of the contracts, a lot of things going on are still being effectuated and being completed. And so properties are still closing. A lot of them are done by electronic signature. Register of Deeds is where you kind of register everything after a closing occurs. A lot of that's being done online. It can also be done by appointment, so that's still going forward. The only kind of hiccup that's somewhat there is what we would call a remote notary. So a lot of documents have to be notarized in a real estate closing. We do a lot of notaries here at Goldfinch Winslow. I think we have 5 notaries on staff. And the Supreme Court has said that you can do a remote notary for court hearings and depositions, but have not said it for real estate closings. And there's not been an executive order that allows remote notary to occur. Notary, you should be in person witnessing someone's signature. Where a remote notary allows that person to authenticate it over the phone or through a video conference by sharing ID and basically attesting that that's their signature. They are who they say they are. That's kind of the hiccup. That's one of the biggest issues, is this remote notary that I think should be addressed and will be addressed going into the future. It just has not been addressed yet. But real estate closings are going forward. So go buy a house or sell a house. Other things that are going forward is that people are realizing that they're not immortal. You have to be prepared. We just read an article down in Georgetown that basically explained that what do you need to do to understand that life is unpredictable. And one of the things to be ready for in our unpredictable world is you can't prevent a lawsuit, but you can prevent liability. You can't prevent death, but you can prepare for it. And that's what estate planning is. So a real uptick in estate planning I guess that makes sense. People are thinking about their mortality. People have time on their hands. And so it's a good time to at least postulate as to what you would want to do with your stuff when you pass. Now, keep in mind, estate planning is not just a will. Estate planning encompasses basically 5 primary documents. There's more. There's other ways to go about doing it. But you got the will, which leaves your material possessions to others. You got a trust where if you want to leave your possessions to someone that you don't trust, you can appoint someone you trust. You have your healthcare power of attorney, which allows someone else to make healthcare decisions for you while you're still alive, but you can't make it. Maybe you're in a car accident, a coma, surgery of some sort. You've got your living will where I am going to pass. This is how I want to pass. You're making your own how I want to pass determinations when that time's going to come. And then you got your durable power of attorney, which allows someone else to basically make decisions on non-healthcare related items, litigation, law, financial, who's going to mow your yard, who's going to pay your medical bills, some of that nature, when you can't make those decisions. And so if you become incompetent or you get to the point where you need it, it's too late to do it, and then you have to spend 10 times as much money having a guardian or a conservator put into place versus going to take care of it now and laying out your own wishes while you still have the ability to do such. So a lot of people are doing estate planning, but one of the biggest things with estate planning is understanding what that encompasses. It shouldn't be a form you fill out, and it shouldn't be a one-time meeting. Here at Goldfinch Winslow, we probably do 3 or 4 meetings with people on their estate planning because you want to make sure it encompasses everything you can possibly encompass. And you want to make sure it's done right and not just done quickly and cheaply, because it does get more expensive on the back end. Another area we're getting a lot of questions on is bankruptcy. Again, there's not hearings being heard, right? So you can file documents, you can do stuff, but bankruptcy is going to be something that is going to be determined, just like foreclosure, just like eviction. In the hopefully near future, hopefully there won't be too much of it, because if we get it done in the near future, then maybe there'll be less of it. But with that being said, bankruptcy will be a huge area of law that's going to blow up, and the world's going to have to learn how to adapt to the situation and this uniqueness of the situation. And talk about adapting, we've talked a little bit in the law in general, but you will see going into the future, because it's happening right now, a lot of virtual hearings where your attorneys, and you might be in an office like this one, where you're having a hearing online, doing virtual hearings or doing video conferences, right? If you can do telemedicine, why can't you do video conferences with an attorney? And that's what I call telelawyering. So basically, you're telelawyer and you're working with an attorney, and maybe you scan documents over and you're reviewing documents, you're going through different situations with your lawyer, and you could be in Greenville and I could be in Myrtle Beach. We've had cases in Hawaii, Florida. Our firms have cases in 27 states. And so we've done a lot of video conferences and stuff of that nature. But, I can't just fly to Missouri as quickly as I can drive down to Georgetown. And so other lawyers, I think, are going to have to learn how to handle that. That's what we call telelawyering. And that's what we do. On our website, we allow you to schedule your own appointment and pay online. And so we've kind of stolen this from, you go to a restaurant and you can schedule your own time to come in there. Online payments, we invoice out through email. And so I think a lot of facilities, not just law firms, can implement these tools that we've learned from this and become more customer friendly. What customer doesn't want to have the efficiency and the ability to save money and time? And so let's give that to them. So as attorneys here on our website, as you can tell, we've made it as efficient as we possibly can by allowing for phone, video, and or in-person consultations that you schedule at your leisure. And then we can send you an invoice through your email, and you can click a button, a link to the online payments, and then just pay it immediately online. So if there's any additional questions or anyone has anything they'd like to ask in general about the law or about being able to assist in the adaptations we're making for our business, how they might apply to you, happy to answer them. Again, Goldfinch Winslow. My name is Tom Winslow. There's our number. And again, my cell phone is 843-655-7333. Should anyone want to ask any questions for these, give or take, last 15 minutes, or as long as it takes, I'm available.
So, Tom, we did have somebody ask a question on our Facebook a couple minutes ago, and they were just curious about restaurants. I don't know if you have any insight that you want to give on, restaurants now and any ideas about when restaurants open, just kind of some insight on that topic.
No, absolutely. So, restaurants, and that's why they were closed down to begin with. You've seen a lot of stuff lately with not just restaurants, but their suppliers. A lot of these meat places and whatnot are shutting down as well. So restaurants are going to have the toughest time. They're going to be the last ones to open back up because the restaurant is a natural place to congregate, right? You go to a restaurant to socialize. You go to a restaurant to not keep your social distance. I mean, that's almost what it's designed for. If it was designed just to eat, we'd be doing what we do all the time. That's curbside pickup, take it and go. But people want to go to restaurants to actually enjoy the social non-distancing. And so restaurants are going to have to really understand. Now, what I've seen a lot and what's been postulated a lot is that they might enforce kind of a new code on restaurants where instead of having tables, sometimes you'll go into a restaurant. I guess back in the day, you go into a restaurant and you'll pull your chair back and there'll be a chair right behind you that you might have to scoot around. They might make restaurants take half the chairs and bar stools out, right? And enforce this mandating or to put in some kind of tape around those to allow them to come back in. Restaurants will be the last ones to open back up. I would imagine, honestly, it's probably not going to be for another 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And the problem with that is that, obviously, at that point, there's going to be a rebound at some point as well, especially when restaurants, bars, clubs, movie theaters, who knows, all these things open back up and people are exposed to each other again. There will be a bounce, and what's going to be the reaction to the bounce? The other hard part for restaurants is going to be the supply because they have to get their merchandise. They don't grow their own food and raise their own cows, so they're going to have to get their merchandise from somewhere, and a lot of those places are being shut down as well, especially a lot of the meat suppliers. So restaurants are going to be hit the hardest.
And I'm going to give everyone a couple more seconds. If you do have any questions right now, please feel free to put them in the chat. But if not, of course, Tom is giving you his information. So whatever questions you may have, or if you want to have those questions answered privately, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to.
Absolutely. I'm looking at my cell phone right now to see if there's any text. Looks like we're good at this point.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again, Tom, so much for doing this presentation this morning. I know I learned a few things that I did not know, and I think it's fascinating how we have really adapted to the situation. It's optimistic to see, of course, we will get through this and we will, of course, have some changes, but I'm so glad that everyone is working together to make the best out of the situation. So thank you all for attending this webinar this morning. We have a lot more additional webinars coming up these following weeks as we are still kind of in this webinar phase. But again, if you have any questions for Tom, his information is on the screen. But if not, we will see you all next time. And thank you again, Tom.
Thank you, ma'am.
Y'all have a great day.
Well, take care. Bye, y'all. Stay healthy.